Can propaganda be art? This question has divided critics, artists, and audiences. Leni Riefenstahl's films glorifying Nazism and Soviet poster art are often cited as propaganda that transcended their purpose to become enduring art. Recently, this debate has resurfaced with the success of Aditya Dhar's Hindi film Dhurandhar. While critics have panned it for blending real-life events with fiction to push an ultra-nationalist narrative, defenders praise its technical finesse, immersive storytelling, and raw intensity, suggesting it goes beyond mere messaging. Asim Siddiqui and Sudhanva Deshpande discuss art and propaganda in a conversation moderated by Anuj Kumar.
This is In Focus, the Hindu's current affairs podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Hindu Parley podcast. I am your host Anuj Kumar. The age-old question whether works created with explicit ideological intent can achieve artistic greatness has long divided critics, artists, and audiences. From Riefenstahl's film glorifying Nazism to the bold constructivist posters of the Soviet era, history offers uncomfortable affirmations of propaganda transcending its purpose to become enduring art, when it marries exceptional craft, innovation, and emotional resonance. In 2025, this debate has been reignited with ferocious intensity by Aditya Dhar's Dhurandhar, a sprawling spy thriller starring Ranveer Singh as an Indian operative infiltrating Karachi's underworld to dismantle terror networks. Released on December 5, the film, blending gritty action, stellar performances, and meticulous world building, has shattered box office records, becoming the highest grossing Indian film of the year. Yet, its triumph is overshadowed by accusations of being dangerous propaganda. Critics have lambasted it for selectively blending real events like IC-814 hijacking, Parliament attack, and 26/11 Mumbai strikes with fiction to push ultra-nationalist narratives, distorting history and fostering anti-Pakistan sentiment in line with the prevailing political rhetoric. Defenders of the film counter that its technical finesse, immersive storytelling, and raw intensity elevate it beyond mere messaging, much like historical precedents where aesthetic power outlives ideological baggage. Does Dhurandhar serve as a modern litmus test for can propaganda be great art? This is the question that we are asking today. We are joined by Professor Asim Siddiqui, who teaches English at the Aligarh Muslim University and has just come out with a seminal book on the poetics and politics of Muslim identity in Hindi cinema. We also have Sudhanva Deshpande, a celebrated name in Indian theatre and a respected author who also makes his presence felt in Hindi films as an actor. Welcome to the Hindu Parley podcast. Welcome to the Hindu Parley podcast, Professor Siddiqui and Mr. Deshpande.
Thank you. Thank you.
Several works of art, books, theatre, and films are often called propaganda. Let's start with a fundamental question. How exactly would you define propaganda?
Actually, if we discuss this particular word propaganda and we see different aspects of this work, in an absolute sense, you can say that all art actually is propaganda. That means whether it is cinematic art or whether it is literature or poetry, because it is talking about some ideas. But I must immediately say that when we use the word propaganda, these days this word is very much in use. Here we are using the word in a very specific sense where a particular filmmaker or a writer or an artist has a particular agenda in mind and a very clear agenda. And there actually propaganda is a selective use of facts, ideas, and maybe images when we are talking about films, which try to persuade a group of people, in this case cinegoers, to accept a particular point of view. And it very nakedly panders to emotions, raw emotions. And by doing that, it tries to actually mold opinions of people. That is actually a very, I can say that a definition of propaganda.
I'd like to add that propaganda has to be seen in the context of a larger ecosystem of propaganda. Propaganda is typically not something that one person does alone. There are organized forces that are behind the work that is seen as propaganda.
Professor Siddiqui, would you say Dhurandhar is well done propaganda as many believe? And how does it compare with the Kashmir Files and Kerala Story kind of explicit propaganda?
Yet, I think certainly it is better than those films. But of course, I would also consider this film place this in that whole ecosystem of which those two films are a part.
In the Hindi film industry, there has been a concerted effort by forces of Hindutva to sort of take control of the film industry in some ways, and this is done both officially as well as sort of through non-state actors, let's say. And as I was saying earlier, there's an ecosystem, and that ecosystem consists of both trolls and vigilantes and these kind of groups on the ground, as well as institutions of the state, as well as networks of funding, financing, exhibiting films, etc., etc. Now, just to give you one small example of this, it's interesting that when Kashmir Files came out, at that time, uh, the state immediately stepped in several states where the BJP was in power. Several government institutions gave their employees either a day off, or they bought tickets, or in different ways they kind of encourage people to go and watch the film. Now, that's a very deliberate act. It's not something that happens spontaneously. At the same time, there was also this larger ecosystem, which is WhatsApp and online, social media, etc., that was promoting the film in a very concerted way. It wasn't spontaneous. So if Kashmir Files did well commercially, which it did, it wasn't purely on the merit of the film, and it wasn't purely because large numbers of people just happened to like the film. The commercial success of Kashmir Files was very much sort of orchestrated. And the last point I want to make here is that despite all this orchestration, it's actually interesting that films such as the Kashmir Files and now Dhurandhar are still exceptions commercially, in the sense that a large number of films that propagate the right wing Hindutva point of view actually don't do well, despite all of this orchestration that goes on to make them sort of commercially successful.
Earlier, you would not have imagined that many of these films would get the award, for example, and that too award for national integration, which actually appears ironical also.
There is no Indian Muslim character in Dhurandhar. Is it still addressing them in some
Uh,
sense?
there are also sometimes very subtle dog whistles in the film. I'm talking about one particular moment in the film where one character talks about Pakistan and says that Pakistan is not our enemy number one. In that sense, actually, it is also part of that kind of ecosystem. Sometimes those dog whistles you can hear that you have many enemies within India, and of course, there are different terms also for them. I don't want to use those terms. So, in this case, also, there is no Muslim character who is a positive Muslim character. And moreover, you can also think about all those absent characters actually. All those absent characters, they're not named, but you can certainly hear those dog whistles. Okay.
Right, right. And how does it compare with Pathan and Jawan kind of
Very
storytelling?
interesting question, because if we think about the genre of the film, of course, this is also kind of a spy film, and those films are also kind of a spy film. So, in terms of genre, okay, there is some similarity. But I would say that one particular thing about Dhurandhar is excessive brutality. I mean, actually, it was very difficult to concentrate on many of those scenes. You feel you feel a sense of repulsion also. Actually, I feel it was very difficult to actually see those scenes and not to feel repelled. Moreover, if we talk about Pathan, I did not see any religious stereotyping in Pathan, and moreover, there was not this kind of brutality. And then another very interesting thing is that Pathan also had that humor. So sometimes humor also makes a film watchable. and its humor lifted the film. And for that matter, many of those films in the Tiger series, whether it was Ek Tha Tiger or Tiger Zinda Hai, those films had those moments of humor. Dhurandhar looks a very angry film all through. So that way, there is a fundamental difference between Dhurandhar and those films which had humor, and where you don't see that kind of religious stereotyping as such.
Right. What I also noticed is that in Pathan and Tiger series, both India and Pakistan are shown as victims of terrorism, and the real culprits lie in the West or somewhere else, or a cartel, corporate cartel or something. Here, it's one-dimensional kind of agenda. So, Dr. Deshpande, would you like to add
Well,
something?
I have to begin with a confession, which is that I'm also part of Jawan, in the sense that I played a small role in the film. I was the head of state towards the end of the film, who signs on that on the list of demands that the Shah Rukh Khan character puts forward, and so that's when all the factories are shut down and so on and so forth. So of course I didn't know what the story of the film was when I shot for it, because they don't disclose that to actors such as me who do smaller parts in the film. But just to say that, I mean, the othering of Muslims and the depiction of Muslims as kind of the enemies within, or as negative characters, etc., is not new per se. Um, you know, uh, it started a long time ago. Think of a film from 1992 called Angar. This is a Shashilal Nair film starring, Jackie Shroff and Nana Patekar in the main roles. What is really disturbing about the film is the depiction of that family. It's as if, the way in which the whole family is shown. They're uncouth, they're dirty, they're um, somewhat less than sort of normal humans, and that has a very clear connection, in my view at least, to the overall atmosphere of Islamophobia that started building up at that time with the Ram Janambhoomi movement and the demand for the demolition of the Babri Masjid from the mid 1980s onwards. And as that kind of reached a crescendo, you find more and more films like this being made.
There's a section that kind of that feels that the present nationalist propaganda is a counter to the films and theater that was inspired by the progressive writers movement in the 1950s, and kind of kept on watching films in the 60s and 70s, which were kind of inspired by that thought. So how do you see that?
I think it's completely misplaced. It's a typical thing that the right wing does. I don't remember in the 50s anybody saying that, look, I can't, that I'm afraid of making a film because the attacks that I'm going to face from, the state or society, or powerful people and so on. Yes, there was the emergency in the 1970s. That was a dark period in Indian history. And yes, films such as um, uh, uh, Kissa Korsika were banned, and that was terrible. But by and large, that was an exception. So, for instance, you can have a film on a historical figure like Jyotirao Phule, a great 19th century social reformer from Maharashtra, and you have to cut out names of caste groups from the film. I mean, how ridiculous is that? That is actually just, falsifying history. This I've heard from my friends in the film world who talk about, now when you make a film, you have to deliberately think about putting in scenes and dialogues that are, rage baiting. Yeah. And so you put that in deliberately because you know that people will be enraged on both sides, and then that is going to create a sort of a social media storm around it, and then people who would ordinarily not have gone to to watch the film also end up watching the film and so on.
Some people say that they enjoyed a work of propaganda even while being skeptical of its message. Would you say that it is ethical to appreciate these artistic qualities, given that the work aims to manipulate your beliefs?
I'll say that so there may be certain parts in a film, certain parts in a book which you may like. Now you see that it is not unusual for viewers to clap for a bad guy in a film. We have so many examples where we are clapping for the bad guy. So that is true about many films. You watch a film, and sometimes a film can also hold a kind of sinister charm. You like that film, you enjoy that film, and you'll enjoy the visuals also. Of course, I'm not talking about the brutal parts. I'm talking about certain visuals also, dances also. You are actually putting together all these things at the end. And so, for example, when you think about a message of a film, or when you think about the discourse that comes from a film, that comes a bit later. But when you are engrossed in a film, you can enjoy visuals, you can enjoy songs, you can enjoy images, you can enjoy acting. So that is possible. I'll say that even certain parts of this film, and I can also say that when I watch, for example, a film like Ghadar, or another film I recall, Rais, for example, it was not a good film. So many of those films, certain parts of that film I could like, but that does not mean that I would say that that film is that film is not problematic. Films are problematic, even though I may like certain parts of those films.
See, art is a complicated business and it works at very many different levels. Now, why is it that, like recently, 50 years of Sholay has been talked about, and there's a new version of Sholay, restored version of Sholay that's got released. Now, Sholay is a film that I grew up with. It came out when I was about less than 10 years old, and I've seen it multiple times over my entire life, and I love the film. Now, does it mean that I endorse every value that is embedded in the film? Do I endorse the value of, let's say, this kind of benevolent patriarchal feudalism that is at the heart of the film? The character of the Thakur, and he alone being the savior of the village. No, I don't endorse that idea at all. But it's a terrific story, and it's told well, and it works at multiple levels. Now, you don't have to endorse everything that you enjoy. On the other side, also, often you watch films that that the message is something that you would endorse, but you actually find them a little boring, or you don't enjoy them so much. That also happens.
Professor Siddiqui, can propaganda in some sense inspire critical thinking also if you watch them carefully?
You must say that critical thinking can never be dead. See, for example, certain films which did not do well commercially, maybe they had a very good message but they did not do commercially well. So many of those films are discovered later now. Many of those books are also discovered later now, because we are talking about books all the time, we are talking about films all the time. So I would say that it is this kind of critical thinking that makes us discover certain old films, see those films afresh, certain old books, and read them afresh. Sometimes wondering why we like those films, or why we like those books, and sometimes wondering why we rejected those books or those films in the first place.
The more you sort of argue against something, the more there is curiosity about it. So, for instance, when I was growing up, I come from a family that has nobody in my family reads Urdu. And nobody in my family speaks Urdu either. We just come from a different part of the world and a different social, background. And so, therefore, Urdu was never part of my world as I was growing up. At the same time, because by the time I became an adult and I came into college and so on, there was this whole anti-Urdu, sentiment that was being stoked. I became curious about Urdu, and I started reading literature in Devanagari, but I started reading poets and writers who wrote in Urdu.
Yeah, with this, we come to an end to this engrossing session of the Hindu Parley. I thank my guests, Professor Siddiqui and Mr. Deshpande, for making time. It was lovely talking to you and for your insightful comments. I thank you for your insightful
Thanks for having us. It was a lovely
It
conversation.
was a lovely conversation indeed.
This episode was edited and produced by Sharmada Venkata Subramanian. If you liked it, do subscribe to In Focus by The Hindu on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Thank you for listening.